Senator John Cornyn is running for re-election here in the great state of Texas, and he is a guy who has had a very good record. He is a guy who a lot of people have looked to for a long time and said, this guy is a good, strong conservative. We on this program have some issues. We don't ever expect to agree with everything anybody does or says. I think that's unreasonable. But he is joining us. We have invited him on the program, and he is joining us now. Senator, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Glenn. Good to be with you.
Thank you. I really don't want this to be a hostile interview, so I hope that you aren't approaching it that you're in hostile territory. But I do want it to be a frank conversation.
I'm glad to do that.
Good. We really come from a place to where we really want to believe that people mean what they say and saying what they mean. We want to believe that people actually still believe in the Constitution when they raise their hands. And there's a lot of things that we can disagree on, but I think there is a fundamental change that has happened in our nation, where there are those who are fighting for politics as usual, and then those who are fighting for the Constitution. And I want to start with a conversation that you had on the radio in Houston, where you talked about Republican on Republican violence. Play the audio.
Freedom Works is an organization that uses Republican on Republican violence, so to speak, to raise money. That's why they exist. They don't exist to run against Democrats. They use it to try to divide Republicans.
I don't think that's true, but at the time, if that were true, we would have Charlie Crist and Arlen Specter and no Rand Paul in office. What do you mean by Republican on Republican violence?
Well, Glenn, it's no secret that I disagreed with the tactic to try to defund Obamacare on the continuing resolution, not because I support Obamacare. My record is clear that I have taken every reasonable opportunity to try to stop it, to repeal it, to block it. But I didn't think the shutdown, which I thought was an inevitable part of that strategy, was the right tactic to use. And I would classify this as at least in terms of the Senate itself, sort of a disagreement on tactics among the family. What I think happened, from my perspective, was that Republicans and conservatives got divided, and then we minimized the strength we would otherwise have by being unified. But I
So hold on. So just a second. So by Ted Cruz standing up, because I don't think this was related to the shutdown, this conversation, but by Ted Cruz standing up and John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and others going on television repeatedly bashing him, you believe that it was Ted Cruz and Freedom Works and people like us that were involved in the Republican violence on violence?
No, I'm talking about the people who raise money by dividing Republicans. I'm not talking about a honest difference of opinion on tactics, and I've tried to make clear the difference between the two. But I do think it was the strategy, or excuse me, the tactic, because I don't think there was much strategy associated with it, to defund Obamacare on a continuing resolution, given Democratic majorities in the Senate and President Obama in the White House was bound to fail, and it did.
So then let me go to, well, because it didn't, anyway. So let me go to this, because it goes to the Republican on Republican violence, I think, that you're referring to. You were for Charlie Crist over Marco Rubio. You were for Arlen Specter over Pat Toomey, and you were against Rand Paul. Is that just because you were for a Republican that was in office, or did you agree with those guys?
Well, Glenn, you'll recall that I was chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee and trying to figure ways to recruit people to run and win Senate seats. And my obligation was, as being elected by Republicans in the Republican conference, to support incumbents. Now, I know a lot of people don't like that. I'm delighted that Marco Rubio won that race. We contributed $2.5 million to his success, as we did to Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. But, that was a tough
Okay.
tough time, believe me, given some of the way some of those races developed. And Charlie Crist has certainly been a disaster.
Okay, so I can accept the role that you played there. Let me just ask one more question on this, and then we'll be through with this. I happen to believe that the Tea Party and those who would like to see a difference, they're tired of seeing the John McCains of the world and the Lindsey Grahams, and they actually believe in the Constitution, and they do believe in a smaller government. They do believe in a government, just a small government. And do you? I mean, I'm curious because I've heard some of your positions on the Tea Party, et cetera, in the past, and I've been confused. I feel I have to ask you, why would you come on this program? Because that's who listens to this program.
Well, it's because I think the Tea Party has been the best thing that's happened to the conservative movement in recent years. 2010, we could not have picked up 7 Senate seats without the Tea Party. And, like every political party, it's composed of different elements to a coalition. And my simple position is we need the Tea Party and their enthusiasm and their votes as part of the Republican coalition, so we can win the election in 2014, and we'll actually be able to govern by retiring Harry Reid. So I think we need all aspects of the Republican coalition, from libertarians to traditional Republicans to Tea Party to, you name it, social conservatives, you name it.
Can I ask a more of a philosophical question here on how we got here? In the big picture, how did we get to a government, assuming that you are for dramatically smaller government, how did we get from a country that understood small government to where we are today? What happened to us?
Well, I think it was the old frog on the stovetop, where the heat was turned up incrementally and not all of a sudden, or else the frog would have jumped out. But I think, the president, in an ironic sort of way, has done us a backhanded favor by demonstrating that his big government scheme, command and control out of Washington, one size fits all, doesn't work. And Obamacare is Exhibit A. So I think it's been gradual over a long period of time. But I think, again, this is part of what I hope has become a restoration movement by folks who affiliate with the Tea Party, and I agree with the principles that I think most conservatives do, that the Tea Party has brought forward, and reminded the traditional Republicans that making deals, bad deals, with the Democrats and liberals has gradually eroded our principles that we all should believe in.
I want to take you back to Mike Lee's plan last month to fund the entire government, yet defund Obamacare. I think a plan that now even the Democrats are for. Unfortunately, now we have put the tentacles of this in, and we will never be able to undo the damage, I don't believe. You initially joined Mike Lee in his pledge to defund Obamacare, and then you removed your name. Word is that you asked for your name to be removed from the pledge by Mitch McConnell. Is that true? And if not, why did you remove your name?
No, it's not true. I reconsidered my signing the letter and whether or not the tactic would succeed or not. So again, it was a disagreement over the tactics. I didn't see any way on reconsideration that Harry Reid would allow that to pass, or that President Obama would sign it. And so, but I want to point out, Glenn, I did vote for the continuing resolution that came over from the House that would have defunded Obamacare. And my record is pretty clear on that, so I appreciate you giving me the chance to hopefully clarify it.
Can you tell me, is that what, well, first of all, let me just bring this up. Is that what you mean in your fundraising letter? You write, every opportunity to defund or repeal the law, I voted in favor of doing so, and I will not waver in my opposition to the law. Is that what you're referring to here?
I wasn't referring to the fundraising letter, but that is my position, yes, sir.
Okay. Can you tell me, because I don't see a plan here from the GOP, what exactly is the plan to defund and remove this albatross of Obamacare?
I think what we're seeing is the collapse of Obamacare on its own, but I think the next step is to win elections in 2014 to get the Senate majority, which will dramatically increase our leverage with President Obama during his last 2 years in office. And I think it will make it much easier for us to basically put Obamacare in the rearview mirror. I share your concerns about this thing taking root, and we want to make sure we do everything to stop it. But this is what happens when a single party tries to commandeer the entire federal government and jam through something that not the people are demanding, but that they think is good for you. When in fact now people are seeing that bearing fruit, and it's exactly the opposite of what President Obama promised. So I continue to be committed to opposing Obamacare and not replacing it with another big government scheme, but with health care that is more affordable, provides better coverage, and doesn't interfere with the choices that we as Americans should be able to make in consultation with our own doctor.
So would that be a free market system, or would that be a government system?
No, it would be a free market system. And here's what I never understood is Quinnipiac back in 2009, the polling group polled the American people, and they said basically that 88%, 89%, I can't remember exactly the figure, of the people responded said they were happy with what they had. And you remember that's when the president said, if you like what you have, you can keep it. Well, that turns out not to be true. But why in the world would the president and his allies in Congress undermine the very foundation of what almost 90% of the American people said they liked in order to provide coverage for the 10% who either weren't covered or didn't like what they had? It just, to me, it speaks to an ideology and an approach to big government solutions that progressives have embraced for a long time, in which we are seeing come to a dramatic failure here. So I think perhaps this is the biggest threat to the president and progressives' agenda because it doesn't work.
You, by the way, you did a fantastic job on grilling Sebelius, and we thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
The one thing, I read an article in this weekend's Forbes that was about the nuclear option, which I want to come back to, but I just want to point out that I haven't heard anybody except in this article point out that the IPAB, the new board that will oversee the pricing, and basically it's the death panel board.
Right.
The Senate said that they were never going to. The Republicans said they will never put anybody on that board, but now that has kind of gone by the wayside because of the filibuster. Especially since all of the powers go back to Kathleen Sebelius. If there's no board, she just decides. And we've already seen her try to do that with a young girl who needed some lung surgery. So she has no problem with that. That is supposed to be in place by January 15th. What have you heard on this?
Well, you're right to point that out. That is one of the dangers of the power play that the Democrats executed last week. And I think there's a lot of nominations, including to the Independent Payment Advisory Board, as you point out, IPAB, which I'm the principal Senate sponsor of the repeal of that provision. But failing that, or at least in the short term, that does enhance the president's power and Kathleen Sebelius's power. You recall I've called for her resignation, but the president, like Eric Holder, he says he has complete confidence in her, which leads me to conclude he may be the only one in America.
Yeah. There's an op-ed here that we have from the New York Times, and it is, by calling for an end of filibusters, the Senate is simply contemplating restoring its traditions by traditional methods you disparage as nuclear. This is something that you wrote in 2005, and you said that ending the filibuster isn't a bad thing, but now you're against it. Can you help us clear the way through that path?
Well, the Democrats invented filibustering judges. This is a concentrated. I mean, this is something that Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats did in consultation with Lawrence Tribe and Cass Sunstein, two liberal legal thinkers and writers. Nobody had ever filibustered a judge previously, but you'll remember that after George Bush became president, Miguel Estrada and a number of others, Priscilla Owen in the Fifth Circuit, a number of others were filibustered. That led to a negotiation, the Gang of 14, which created a new precedent in the Senate. The precedents operate like rules, and basically that new rule was that only in the event of extraordinary circumstances would judges be filibustered. But the Democrats weren't satisfied with that when they tried to pack the D.C. Circuit Court, the second most important court in the nation, in order to get a rubber stamp for the president's liberal and ideological agenda. So I was just going back to that 2005, I believe it was, Gang of 14 precedent, and saying that this was an extraordinary circumstance, and these judges should be filibustered.
Senator, we would love to have you on again. We're up against the clock, but we have a lot to talk to you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on Iran, et cetera, et cetera. So if we could have you back, we sure would. I would love to have you.
I've enjoyed it, Glenn. Thanks. I'd love to come back.
Thank you very much. Senator John Cornyn.